Hey everyone, it is Irene here. Welcome to this video, to this channel, and to this entire world of healing, trauma, nervous system health, and all things neuroplasticity. Today I want to cover a topic that we are asked about quite a bit, and I was asked a question a little while ago on social media, and it went something like this. How do toxins, in this case the person was asking about mold, so mold, how would toxins like mold play into nervous system dysregulation? So how would these toxins, I'm going to say, impact or affect nervous system dysregulation? And I want to keep this video really simple. I'm not going to go into all the health things that we can do to detoxify and rid our bodies of toxins. I will mention a few things towards the end of this video that I've already mentioned in previous videos. But the first thing I want to just lay out, and I have a piece of paper here with some notes on it, which basically says the goal is nervous system regulation. So we want to build our regulation within our nervous system physiology. Of course, that is what I teach. That's what my colleagues teach. That's what we work with. So in other words, someone has got dysregulation within their system, which is a result from what we pretty much can see stored, what most people would know of as trauma, but for us, it's stored survival stress. So the fight, flight, and freeze is stored within our system, and this creates dysregulation of these autonomic nervous system processes, systems. And then of course, when that occurs, when this autonomic nervous system is wonky and out of whack and doesn't have good flow, doesn't have good regulation, not only does it impact how we feel these potential survival stresses, either high level of fight, flight, or lots of freeze and shutdown, and I'll talk about those also in a moment. But when we have this dysregulation, it impacts all of the systems in our body, like our digestion, like our immune system, like our endocrine hormone system, our cardiovascular system, our ability to engage with others, with the world, with ourselves. So it impacts so much. And when we have good regulation on board, our system, our human system, is really, really efficient and good at detoxifying the body and getting rid of foreign invaders and pathogens. And if we have if we eat something that maybe is a little off, let's just say, we will end up with what we would call food poisoning, where we're throwing up and diarrhea is occurring. That's actually a very good response to something that is not good for us. We're purging it out. Same with a fever, right? High temperature to basically get rid of whatever is going on inside. We won't go down that full road, but I hope you get the point. Now, there are some instances, I believe, where even with the most regulated system, health like crazy, if there is something so horrifically toxic in our environment, we might not be able to detoxify and work with it. And I'm thinking right now of a show I'm watching. It's called Chernobyl, but it's based on the nuclear disaster that occurred in Chernobyl in the early 80s, or in the 80s, I should say. It was the mid 80s, I believe. It's a biopic. I'm watching it on Netflix. I don't think the most regulated, healthy, clean living person would have been able to have not been affected by that nuclear waste and fallout and the toxins that were just everywhere, right? So there are some exceptions here. But let's just say we're not in that situation, and we're in a world where we have fairly clean air and access to clean water and healthy food and all the things. I do believe we can do a lot to detoxify the system. And let's just say a person's system is dysregulated. And of course, this is a spectrum. So again, the spectrum might be someone who is a little more on the high level of fight, flight. So that would look like lots of anxiety, lots of tension, lots of hypervigilance, that kind of thing. Whereas the other end of the spectrum would be what we would call more freeze energy, more functional freeze energy. If you've never heard the term functional freeze, I did another video on that a while ago. We'll post that below so you can watch that. Shutdown, collapse, this kind of bodily dissociation, this numbness, not feeling anything inside. So if we have the spectrum, and of course there's all the in-betweens, some people might have a bit of shutdown in certain situations and then they're in hypervigilant, I should say, in other environments. This also shows how complex the system is. But here's what I've learned regarding toxins in my own journey and working with people is there's usually one of two types. Again, this is very general, but I'm going to put two types of folk. One type is the type of person who is very functionally frozen. I was like this at one point, very shut down, but still, functional, able to be in the world, do things, all those sorts of things, but they're very disconnected at a sensory level from things like scent, these toxins, chemicals. And this is, I find, very, very, very common. If I'm walking down the street and someone walks by me who has perfume on, or you can tell they use really strong detergents when they clean their clothes, whether it's through the laundry soap or what they put in the dryer, those dryer sheets, I can smell that scent. And the thing is because I have regulation in my system, I smell the scent, but it doesn't put me on the floor in a sense, out. I am not going into a panic attack. I am not having a migraine headache. I'm not feeling the need to run from that. I sense it, I smell it, I don't like it, gross, but I keep walking, right? So I have an appropriate, at least for me in my current experience now in the year 2022, I now have an appropriate response to these chemicals, to these toxins. 10 years ago, I didn't have this. Definitely 20 years ago, I used that stuff myself. I would use perfume, I would use scented deodorants that were, classic from the drugstore, laden with all the chemicals, all that kind of stuff, and it didn't bother me. Now, the fact that it didn't bother me didn't mean it wasn't impacting my system. And so this is where the toxin thing is interesting, because someone might, in this example, the person asked about mold, they may have mold in their home, or they may walk into a home with mold, but because of their functional freeze physiology, they're not going to notice it. And of course, everyone's different, but if we play that as a hypothetical, let's just say they move into a home and they have no clue that there is anything like that in the house, and then they start getting sick. They start getting symptoms. They start having hormonal disruptions or all of the things. And, of course, you can Google this. Everyone's going to be different in how they are impacted with things like mold, for example, right? But they might not know that it's there because their senses are dulled. And our senses can get dulled when we are storing this survival stress, this stored trauma in our system. So that's one example. The other example is an individual who has hypersensitivity, is hyper alert, hyper vigilant to the environment. And so they would be the person that would walk in and immediately perhaps sense that mold or those chemicals. And again, hypothetical, their system might go into more of a sense of dysregulation, more activation within their physiology. And it could be, like, let's just say they have to stay there because for whatever reason they have to, then their system may go into a bit of a shutdown, a bit of a functional freeze to maintain their presence in that environment that is toxic. If we just go with that example, let's just say that you walk in somewhere and it's incredibly toxic and you can't leave. Okay, work with that. But then when you get out of that environment, that's where one needs to purge, needs to cleanse, needs to get that disgust, that fight flight energy out. Now, the interesting thing is that as we become more regulated, as I said, this goal is nervous system regulation. As we get more regulated at a real level, at these senses, at our autonomic level, we have accurate perception of the environment, accurate perception of danger, not just chemicals, but people and situations. We sense, our spidey sense is more online, and we know, don't walk down that dark alley. We might not know why, but something says don't do it. This is metaphoric and literal at the same time. The other thing that occurs when we get more regulated within our system is we get more internal perception of what's going on inside. So if we use that expression or that example, I should say, in terms of, say, food, toxins in food, when we are not attuned to our internal senses, our organs, this thing called interoception, we may eat a lot of bad, crappy food, dyes, chemicals, bad fats, hydrogenated fats, all the things that is, in our food supply when we're not eating whole, clean food from the ground, from the earth. We might bring that food into us and we have no clue that it's not good for us. And it's not that we maybe don't want to be healthy, but our perception is numb. It's not online as well as it could be. And so I have also found that as my system has gained more regulation, as my capacity has gotten bigger, and as I'm more connected to the environment and myself in it, I have very little tolerance for bad food, chemicals, preservatives, bad fats, all the things that we really don't want to put into our body. Like I said, that's a whole other topic, and there's so much information out there on eating clean food and eating healthy fat and getting preservatives out of our body. I mean, at the end of the day, we want to not eat anything, if we can help it, that is in a package that has tons of preservatives. And I don't mean salt. I mean like the chemicals, the dyes, the words that we usually can't pronounce. We want to stay away from that stuff. So to wrap this back to this question of how does a toxin like mold impact nervous system dysregulation, it really depends on the person. Of course, it depends on the level of toxicity. And at the end of the day, we want to A, build regulation to our nervous system, and B, we want to ensure that we are getting rid of as many toxins, as many chemicals as we can. I know that it's not always possible, and no one is perfect. I certainly am not. I still use shampoo and these sorts of things, but how can we mitigate the toxic exposure in our lives so that we can allow our system to really not be having to fight and purge these things? Now, a little while ago, I did a video titled, I think it was My Health Regimen, 20 Years in the Making. So if you haven't seen that, I don't tell you what to do, but I go through some of the things that I have found are essential, like exercise, whole food, clean fats, good fats, and by that I mean dietary fat. The key is you want to avoid as many processed fats, hydrogenated fats, margarine, anything that's been basically altered. We want to avoid things like seed oils. Again, look that up. It's pretty easy to find that information now. But also things like sweating. And I mentioned exercise, but the reason why we want to exercise is the sweating process helps detoxify and get the stuff out. So things like saunas are very good for this. And I get into some other things in that video that I definitely recommend. I hope this has been useful. Like I said, this wasn't something where I'm going to say, if you have these toxins, this is what you should do. Of course, there are some naturopathic doctors out there and functional medicine doctors who specialize in types of therapy when someone knows they've had insane toxic exposure, say to mercury, for example, and there's ways of getting that stuff out of the system, but that is not my expertise. But when we come down to this nervous system level, the healthier the nervous system is, the more regulated it is, the better it can detoxify and rid the body of these toxins, and the more tuned it is to knowing what to avoid and what to stay away from. Of course, we can blend this into people in our lives, situations in our lives. Toxicity isn't just in the form of chemicals, it's in all sorts of forms. So take care, keep healing, keep learning, and keep growing that nervous system capacity, keep bringing regulation to your system. I know I didn't go into all the steps and all the ways to do that. That is what my website is for. So if you haven't visited my website, please head over there and start with my resources, my classes, my courses. Those are all there to teach you how to bring regulation back to your nervous system. All right, everybody, thank you so much for being here, and we will see you next time.